Chaos ensues across Europe as furious farmers lay down their tools, blockade roads, and ignite protests, sparking a crisis that reverberates across the continent.
Protests that began in France and then Germany have been spreading across the continent.
Across Europe, a groundswell of farmer discontent is erupting into massive protests against government-imposed Net Zero Agenda 2030 policies. Without a voice in the decision-making process, farmers find themselves thrust into a landscape of increased taxes, slashed subsidies, and suffocating regulations, pushing many small to mid-sized agricultural businesses to the brink of collapse. From Denmark to Ireland, and everywhere in between, farmers are taking to the streets, joined in solidarity by truckers and transportation workers, creating a formidable display of opposition. In a powerful show of solidarity, truckers are taking direct action by dumping foreign wine imports and other goods, standing shoulder to shoulder with farmers facing the brunt of net zero taxes. The looming threat of bankruptcy for vineyards is driving this dramatic move, leaving grocery stores scrambling as shelves empty of fresh produce and essential foods. Lines of tractors rolled menacingly across a residential street in Poland and across a German bridge, while farming protesters in Italy burned spectacular nighttime fires by stone statues. Farmers staged road blockades on the Dutch-Belgian border and in Greece, while in Poland, there were discussions about closing border crossings with Ukraine as protests across Europe regarding expenses and bureaucratic hurdles gained momentum. Why the protests? Farmers have said they face falling sale prices, rising costs, heavy regulation, powerful and domineering retailers, debt, climate change, and cheap foreign imports, all within an EU agricultural system based on the premise that bigger is better. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, farmers in several EU countries have faced soaring costs, especially for energy, fertilizer, and transportation. In response to the escalating cost of living crisis impacting consumers, governments and retailers have taken steps to mitigate rising food prices. Farmers throughout the EU express numerous concerns, including mounting debts, the influx of inexpensive imports, pricing challenges, climate change impacts, and the burden of stringent EU regulations. Unlike their counterparts outside the EU, European farmers face rigorous laws, increasing the cost of farming operations. Consequently, their products are priced higher, yet they must compete with cheaper imports in the market, putting them at a disadvantage. Additionally, individual countries grapple with specific issues, such as dwindling tax breaks and subsidies, measures that the governments are scaling back, much to the discontent of farmers, leading to widespread protests in response. Beside that, in southern Europe, things are getting tough. Water reservoirs are drying up fast, and wildfires are burning down farms. Governments might have to limit water use, which could lead to protests. And farmers? They feel stuck between trying to make cheap food and protecting the environment. It's a big mess, and it's only getting messier. And to cap it all off, the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, a €55 billion subsidy system supporting Europe's food security for over 60 years, has traditionally favored economies of scale, driving consolidation and leaving many farms burdened with debt. Recent EU initiatives, like the Farm to Fork strategy, aim to mitigate agriculture's 11% contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, with targets like halving pesticides by 2030 and increasing organic production. However, farmers already struggling with strict regulations on issues like irrigation and animal welfare see these new policies as unfair, economically unsustainable, and potentially counterproductive. They argue that the proposed measures, such as reducing pesticide and fertilizer use and increasing non-agricultural land use, are unrealistic and threaten their livelihoods. Balancing environmental goals with the economic viability of farming is a pressing challenge facing the EU agricultural sector. Let's have a look at the country-wide situations in Europe and their current status. France. tractor blockades paralyzed highways in France on January 29th, demanding better pay, reduced bureaucracy, and safeguards against foreign competition. Despite President Macron's concessions, farmer unions remained dissatisfied, and over 90 protesters were detained outside a Paris food market on January 31st. However, French farmers eased roadblocks on February 2nd, following the government's offer of over €400 million to address their concerns. Germany. Starting January 8th, German farmers initiated a week-long nationwide protest against subsidy reductions due to the government's decision to eliminate a tax break on agricultural diesel, prompted by budget constraints after a constitutional court ruling in November. Concerned about bankruptcy, farmers fear the repercussions. With the next Bundesrat session scheduled for March 22nd, resolution of the government farmers' dispute may extend for almost 2 more months, prolonging the wait for an official conclusion. Italy. Italian farmers rallied in Rome, staging a convoy on the capital's ring road to protest cuts in agricultural sector support, echoing discontent with EU agricultural policies. Demonstrations spread to Liguria as farmers drove tractors to the Sanremo Song Festival in Florence. Protests persist across Italy, mirroring discontent seen throughout Europe. Spain. Spanish farmers launched nationwide protests on February 6th, disrupting traffic on numerous highways. Violence erupted on February 10th in Madrid as police clashed with farmers and truck drivers attempting to block a main road. Protesters denounce EU environmental regulations, high taxes, and bureaucratic hurdles. Demonstrations are expected to continue throughout February as various agricultural groups and organizations maintain their street protests across Spain. Belgium. Angry farmers driving tractors stormed Brussels, protesting outside European Parliament against high taxes and rising costs. Their grievances extend to EU's efforts for sustainable agriculture and the bloc's decision to lift quotas on Ukrainian grain exports. Protests continue with farmers targeting key locations, including Antwerp, causing disruptions at Europe's major port on February 13th. Poland. Polish farmers, amidst a months-long strike commencing on February 12th, block roads nationwide to denounce EU environmental regulations and non-EU competition, demanding action from both national authorities and the bloc to address escalating production costs, diminishing profits, and unfair competition from external markets. Greece. Farmers in central and northern Greece erected blockades in solidarity with counterparts across Europe, demanding government assistance to mitigate rising energy prices and climate change effects. On February 2nd, the Greek government pledged aid, including extending tax rebates for agricultural diesel to quell protests. In response, Greek farmers escalated actions, dumping chestnuts and apples outside an agricultural fair on February 3rd, with further protests planned post a February 6th meeting. Romania. Hundreds of Romanian farmers and truck drivers commenced protests 3 weeks ago, disrupting traffic with convoys of vehicles near major cities, including Bucharest. On February 2nd, a coalition of government announced an agreement to address the protests sparked by high business expenses. The farmer protest even stretched across the English Channel to the UK at the back end of last week. British farmers, with the country no longer in the EU, made an impromptu tractor demo in the port town of Dover as they protested against foreign imports of food. As the sun sets on the European countryside, the echoes of farmer protests reverberate across the continent, painting a vivid picture of discontent and frustration. From the bustling streets of Brussels to the tranquil fields of Romania, farmers are making their voices heard, demanding fair treatment and sustainable solutions. The challenges they face, from economic pressures to environmental concerns, are complex and multifaceted. Yet, amidst the chaos, there is a glimmer of hope as governments and farmers engage in dialogue and seek to find common ground. The future of European agriculture hangs in the balance, but one thing is certain: the resilience and determination of farmers will continue to shape the landscape of our food supply for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the tumultuous world of European agriculture. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on pressing global issues. Together, let's continue to amplify the voices of farmers and work towards a more sustainable and equitable future. Until next time, take care and stay informed.